Hey guys, welcome back to Connor Reads. Today we're going to be running through a self-development book. It's called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. The way we're going to structure things today is I'm going to give you a brief summary on the author, then a brief summary on the topics expressed inside of this book, and then I'm going to talk about the things that I loved and some things that I didn't love about the book as a whole. So let's hop into it. So talking about the author to begin with, we have Mr. Ryan Holiday. Mr. Ryan Holiday was very successful in business early in his career. He worked as a C-level executive for some huge companies that you would have definitely heard of before. He had some very quick growth, some very quick progression, and it sounds like all of it was based on a skill set, which is fantastic. Now he hosts a podcast called The Daily Stoic, which is linked to a YouTube channel which pumps out similar content, and I believe he owns a bookstore, which I'm a huge fan of as well. So this book is rooted in Stoicism. Stoicism is a philosophy from a long time ago. Based on my research, it's from roughly 300 BC, so 300 years before the zero, which means that it's roughly 2322 years old. And I ummed and ahed about giving you a definition of Stoicism because I thought it was kind of hard. I don't think there is one given definition. So I ended up just deciding that Stoicism was a way of being happier as a whole based on changing your perspective and removing ego. This book, removing ego from situations to allow you to make better decisions. And Ryan's broken this book down into 3 different sections. So how ego, which is everybody has, even if you think you don't, how ego can affect your decisions in an aspirational stage of life. So a period of life where you are aspiring to do more and preparing, planning, and getting ready to go after something. How ego can affect you in a successful period of life once you've started getting some results and achieving some things that you set out to achieve, and how ego can blind you and be your biggest enemy, and how you can kind of believe your own hype and what that does to slow you down. And then the 3rd section is failure. So if you've had a big failure, how ego can whisper in your ear and stop you from trying again, or stop you from trying hard, and all different types of ways of holding you back. So wherever you are in life, you can definitely pick up this book and you can find something that directly relates to your situation. So for me, the premise of the book was to recognize, well, what is ego? How is it affecting me? And how can I remove or take steps to start reducing my ego to allow me to move into scenarios ego-free, to be happier, more positive, have a better perspective, and to make better life decisions because of that. So what did I love? There was tons. The first thing that I loved about this book was quotes. The start of every chapter has a quote that is relevant to that chapter. And I'm somebody who gets quite inspired by quotes. I always am looking them up, especially from ancient people. And what I mean by that is anyone from like the ancient Romans or ancient Greeks. I always slightly inspired by quotes. So for me, it was awesome that quotes were at the start of each chapter. But also there's a wide range and variety of quotes. There's quotes from, the ancient world. There's also quotes from people in the last 50, 100, 200, 1,000 years as well. And what it did was a couple of things. Number one, it got me excited when I saw somebody that I'm already excited about have a quote, and I wrote it down and I added it to my quotes list. The second thing was it really introduced me to a lot of characters and people that are highly successful and did a lot of great things that I'd never heard of before. So not only was it educating me on the topic of the book, which was Ego is the Enemy, it also gave me a ton of people to research and learn about for inspiration moving forwards. The second thing I loved is that this is a nightstand book. And what I mean by a nightstand book is a book where you don't need, and the goal isn't to pick it up and read the entirety, and well, at least that wasn't my goal anyway. And the reason for that is there's so much to digest. It's broken down into small chapters. I would say each chapter is maybe 3 to 6, 7 pages long, meaning that it's a really digestible chunk. And for me, I would read a chapter and there was so much great information and information that applied to me that there was no real point moving to the next chapter straight away. I needed to digest that information and see, does that sit with me well? Like, how am I using that information? Is that actually indicative of my life? Before the next night, I would read another chapter or maybe 2 chapters before sleeping again. And that's what I mean by a nightstand book, is it's one you can keep on the nightstand for a long period of time. I actually purchased this book, it was 6 weeks ago, and it's taken me 6 weeks to read because as I'm reading other things, I will just have this on my nightstand so that I can, read a chapter or 2 chapters before bed. So that's another thing I loved. And the third thing that I loved actually comes from the second as well. I had some amazing sleeps after reading a chapter or two of this book. I'm not sure about you guys, but I'm somebody who goes to bed and sometimes I find it really, really hard to fall asleep straight away. My brain is going 100 miles an hour. Sometimes it's just, you know, excited. Sometimes it's thinking about things that happened today. Sometimes it's worrying or getting a little anxious about things that are going to happen tomorrow or further down the line. Or if I've had a real lazy day where I've not done anything, then, you know, you're trying to fall asleep and you're just a little frustrated with yourself. You're like, man, I should have done this, I should have done that. This book, I believe, is very much focused around, and maybe Stoicism as well, is focused around peace of mind. I think it allows you to view your perspective as, you know, it is what it is. Let's remove the ego out of it. Let's move the too much self-love or too much self-hatred out of it, and allow ourselves to see clearly like what has happened. And that also gives you a clear perspective of, well, what needs to happen and how I can move forwards as well. So I had some incredible sleeps. It allowed me to sleep, you know, soundly, and I think a peace of mind is probably what we're looking for as humans, regardless of our level of success or failure. So yeah, like if you struggle sleeping, I would say maybe try something like this. And I always have a nightstand book that's similar, and I'm going to do a video called Nightstand Books that always help me with those types of things. So moving on to dislikes, is there anything I disliked about this book? It's hard. I think it's tough to do dislikes for self-help books because there's so much great information in them, and the goal of the book is to help you out, like the clue is in the title. So the one thing I will say is that if you come into reading this book on the defensive in any way, shape or form, it's going to be a really, really tough read. And it was for me at times as well. And the reason it took me 6 weeks to read this is it's not a huge book. I think there's only like 230 or 240 pages in it. And it's broken down nicely into small chapters. So even reading a few chapters a night, it shouldn't take 6 weeks. There's a few things that, you know, kind of hurts your feelings. Like you read it and you're like, wow, so it wasn't my boss's fault. It wasn't, you know, the universe's fault or my parents' fault or anyone else. It really was me and allowing my ego to get in the way of a ton of situations. So a couple of times it took me a few days to actually digest the information and to be able to come back and start reading through the book again. So I suppose my only dislike is a bit of a cop-out because it, you know, it's a massive positive of the book, and it's a necessary negative is it's gonna hurt your feelings at some point, and it will force you to look at yourself and take full accountability. And sometimes that sucks. Like it's not fun, it's not nice. And I definitely don't believe that I'm going to be doing that constantly moving forwards. I think I'll have to continue to read this book and practice the practices inside of it. But yeah, only pick this book up if you are, you know, determined to make a change and you are willing to maybe think, okay, well, you know, this has got to be my fault. Overall, I would say this is an incredible book for anybody who wants to have a, you know, look at themselves and take steps moving forward and would like to remove ego from their life. So go out, pick up the book. However, what I will say is if you don't have time to read a book, which I don't think is possible for anybody, but if you feel like your life is like that, or you just don't really like reading, I watched a video in preparation for this, and it was Ryan Holiday, who's the author, and he has a YouTube channel, and I'm going to put the link in my description. And essentially he sums up the book's values in less than 5 minutes, which I thought was incredible. You know, how better to understand a book, a summary, than from the author. I would still always recommend reading the book, of course. Like you can't get the same level of information on something that I, you know, invested hours of time into versus someone talking for 5 minutes. But if you also subscribe to his YouTube channel and then maybe listen to some of his podcasts, I think that's a great way to, you know, not just digest, but like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like osmosis, absorb all the information, because you need a repeated message over and over again for info to go in. Outside of that, if you've enjoyed listening to this summary and review, click like or click subscribe. If you have any comments, please put them down below. I've been reviewing a ton of books recently. I flip between genres. I do a lot of fantasy, I do some classics, and I do some self-development as well. So I'd love to have you along for the journey. Have an amazing day.